Hello, beautiful people. Thank you for listening to the GrabLives podcast. Please like and subscribe to Apple, Spotify, and YouTube platforms. Also, for anyone listening, the views and the opinions of the GrabLives podcast does not reflect the views or the opinions of the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. For today's guest, I'm having Shaun Taylor, who has come down from Canada to visit me in my studio, and he's a fascinating person who's done a lot of endurance coaching for BMX and not BMX, but mountain biking, who do 24-hour mountain biking expeditions. And he's more than just that. He's done a lot of work with first responder and military veteran mental health. So listen to my conversation with Shaun. He's a fascinating human being. I was invited to be a guest on the Collective podcast, which he is a co-host, and we just started clicking, and I'm having each of those members on the podcast as well. So listen to this fascinating conversation. It's very stimulating and opening and revealing who we are as human beings and who we are as particularly men, talking about just interesting conversations. So enjoy this podcast episode, and I love you guys. Take care.
It's time for GrabLives.
All right, brother. My buddy Shaun. What's your last name, man?
Taylor, Taylor.
Okay. Sounds good, man. I have one of my best friends. His last name is Taylor.
No way.
Yeah, man. I was the best man at his wedding.
Oh, how far did you go back?
Since kindergarten.
And you stayed close all that time?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, there's actually a group of us. It's probably 5 friends of mine, and we grew up since kindergarten, and we just stayed friends.
That's unusual.
Right. Everyone always says that.
Well, for good reason, because it is unusual. So what was it that held what was the glue?
I don't know, man. I think we just became family, and most of our parents were friends, and then we just stayed family and friends.
Was it natural, or did you all have to make an effort, or?
No, I mean, I think now that once we all have families and kids, things have kind of changed, but I think generally we considered loyalty as an integrative fashion in our life, and we just kind of just have so many memories ingrained, you know?
Was that passed on through parental units, or was that something that the group self-identified with in the sense of kind of a loyalty to the small unit, as it were?
I think it was, we self-identified with each other, you know? It was like when we were kids, we were like, hey, we like each other. Hey, let's hang out. And then it became this thing since then.
Well, I wish there was more of that nowadays.
True.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of them live around the corner from here, and we still see each other all the time. I just had my wedding, and all of them were my groomsmen.
Oh, wow.
So it was pretty amazing.
Dude, that is pretty rad.
Yeah.
Rare.
Everyone who knows us, also, they just know like our group, and they are aware of this group because we've been like friends since forever. So every time there's a big photo of us.
So how would you title your group? Like, if you were a rock band, what would it be all about?
Well, we grew up kind of talking about how we were these punk rock skater kids, and we gave ourselves this title as like the Hesh Crew.
There it is.
Because, in the 80s, have you heard of Hesh or Hesher?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was like a thing where you were either fresh in the 80s, Run DMC, kind of that era, like that style started to accumulate from that era.
Right.
And then, but Hesher was like this, leather jacket, skateboarding
Little
kid. Edgier,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's where that came from.
And do you still feel like you're part of that jam, or?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if it'll ever go away.
Who knows? Only time can tell.
Keep an eye on it.
Dude, I'm really stoked to have you on because I just, after the conversation we had on the Collective podcast.
Yeah, just recently, of course.
Right? So I was like, dude, I want to have each of those guys individually on the podcast.
Yeah, it was a good idea.
Yeah. So I think So I don't even know how Chance found me.
I'm not sure either.
I think he found me maybe from my buddy E.T., Eric Tung.
Oh, right.
So I think
Commander
that's
Tung.
Commander Tung. So
Commander
that's,
Eric Tung.
he's the only guy in
Shout
the Northwest. Yeah. He's the only guy in the Northwest that I had done a podcast with recently.
All right.
So I was like, dude, how did Chance find me? And I think I was like, oh, it was E.T.
Yeah.
So
Eric's a great guy.
cool dude.
Cool dude.
So I was asked by Chance, hey, you want to come on here and do a conversation about something? And I was like, yeah, man, whatever you want. I love having conversations, and especially when you're working with other podcasters,
Yeah, right. Right.
Because they kind of get the flow of conversation. You know what I mean?
Well, it is you can call it a career or a job or a hobby or whatever you want to call it, but ultimately if you're going to do something long enough and well enough, you understand a rhythm, and the rhythm is important, and how to communicate is important, and it's a learned skill within podcasting. And outside of anyone who's never podcasted, I'm sure can communicate at an extremely high level, will perhaps struggle within a podcast, particularly if it's live, because it has a different feel, a different vibe, a different energy to it. And so, I think it's a learned process within podcasting to be able to communicate well. So, talking with other, we'll call it seasoned podcasters, is something that I always look forward to, because I still feel like I'm really, really new to this game, even though I've got I've got hundreds of podcasts now. So, but I still feel like I'm a noob.
No, 100%. And that streamline of conversation, knowing when to kind of pull back a little bit, let the person talk, listen, and then knowing when to just be silent as well. Because when you're having a conversation and someone is on the other side constantly doing this, yeah, and like you can't let the person talk. There's just, you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Well, what is tricky, and it's something that I really had to, for myself, really almost create rules for myself, and it was to slow down my brain. I tend to think quite quickly, and I tend to have answers rapidly. That doesn't mean they're correct answers. It just means that answers appear. And I in the past, I've always had the desire to get my answers out like really, really quick, and not in front of an audience, but to the person, to keep a conversation moving fast. But podcasting taught me to stop thinking in that fashion and simply become almost like an empty vessel, accepting whatever the other person is passing on to me or putting out into the universe. And then it's my role to accept whatever is given to me, and then take it from there when it's my turn to speak, if in fact there is ever a turn to speak. And so really it was a whole new way of communicating for me that I realized pretty quickly that I wasn't that good at.
Yeah, 100%. It's there's a lot of growing pains in the beginning, especially with the tech. It just getting things on track with the audio, with the video. If you guys do video, or no, you guys do, and then this last year was the first year I actually went to use online like streaming services like StreamYard, right?
Yeah.
And so that changed the ball game, where I'm talking to individuals across the world, and now I'm capable of just having deeper conversations with experts on stuff, and then having opportunities where I meet new people like you guys and stuff that comes out of left field. It's really opened up the ball game a lot more.
Yeah, we've had Chance does all the booking of all the guests, and effectively, I prefer that the guests choose the topic that we're going to step into. When I jump into the podcast, typically about 60 seconds before we go live, oftentimes I don't know what the topic is going to be, and sometimes I don't even know all the guests, so I'm not even sure who's going to be showing up at times.
That's cool.
I really like that. It's not that it keeps me on my toes, and it's not that it's like makes things difficult or more difficult. It's just the way I like to do it. And I also like the idea of course, Chance, when he's speaking to the guest before I jump in, just before we go live. I love the idea that he gets his sort of chance time with the guest, and however long he wants to quietly chat with them in the green room before I show up. I never want to steal time away from him, so I try to sequester time for him, and then I'll come in and not break up that flow, get into the podcast, see where it goes. That way, Chance has a pretty good sense of who you are before we go live, but I don't know anything about you really before we go live. And it's not my job, but it's one of the things that fascinates me about once we get into the live portion of the podcast. I'm pretty rapidly trying to understand who you are as the new guest on many levels. I'm trying to understand you within the conversation, but I'm also trying to understand how you tick at a deeper internal level. And then I'm trying to understand your aura or energy or your vibe, within about a second or so. And so I'm trying to understand a lot of layers of the person who I've only just been introduced to 60 seconds prior. So, podcasting for me it offers a lot of things about learning more about human beings, for sure.
Yeah, and Chance has a really good way at being the host to guide the conversation. So that takes some skill. That's why after we did the episode, I was like, hey, Chance, great job, dude, because there's a special, unique perspective and voice to do that, and it's not that easy.
It is not.
He makes it look easy, which is good. And I really loved the perspective on it. And yeah, I mean, you guys had something I've never done, which was 4 people on one episode, and you guys have probably done more than 4 people on one episode, which I found to be brilliant. It was a cool, different perspective, refreshing, and yeah, I was just kind of curious how you met Chance, or how you guys know each other.
Yeah, well, 4 years ago, I wasn't really on social media at all. In fact, I was hanging out in my little Miyamoto Musashi cave, just trying to be left alone. And I was doing my thing, kind of off the radar, and I liked it that way. But some friends kind of reached out to me, and they'd been reaching out for years, and not to see how I was doing, but they'd reach out to ask me to kind of get back into the game, which I'll describe momentarily. And I always brush them off. It's not that I would say, nah, don't ever contact me again. It would just be, a couple of laughs back and forth, and I just wouldn't engage. I would say, yeah, it's great talking to you. Look forward to hearing from you another time in the future. Talk to you later, and I'd bounce. And I wouldn't engage. I wouldn't maintain the relationship on a back and forth basis. People reached out to me. I didn't reach out to people because I just kind of wanted to be left alone. And it wasn't because I was depressed or sad or couldn't be around other humans. I'm quite comfortable with myself, and I had a lot of deep thinking to do, and just in a phase of my life where I was in my little cave, and eventually some key people reached out to me again about 4 years ago, and one of the key individuals, a good friend of mine, we worked together in several units, said, "Hey, Shaun, the reason I'm calling this time is because we need your help." And I said, "For what? And who's we?" And he said, "Well, are you familiar with the rate of mental health struggles in the Canadian Armed Forces? And are you aware of the amount of suicides that are going on within the veteran community and the currently active serving community?" And I said, "No, I'm not. I don't track these things. I'm in a different phase of my life." And he said, "Well, listen, we want you to take a look at it this weekend. And if you do, let us know what you think, but just do me that favor." And I said, "Okay, I'll do that for you, Tim." And then his wife came on the phone and kind of reiterated that, there was a need for me to kind of engage in this process, perhaps. And I said, "Okay, I'll look at it." Over the weekend, I started looking at the numbers that I'd never seen before. And you know how that goes. Once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
Right.
And so I was kind of screwed. And so I took the weekend, once I saw the numbers, to think, okay, well, what's my next step? I've got to do something about this, but what does that look like? And so that weekend, I decided to give away my company for free. I had a 15-year high performance race coaching company at that time. Looked after athletes all over the world. I had lots of athletes that I was responsible for, like for some I'd been looking after for over a decade, and now was about to get rid of them, or I was about to leave my industry, as it were. And that was a real struggle for me because it was like almost giving away your kids, but for a higher purpose to some degree. And so, I went through that little mental anguish process, and then sort of decided I was going to commit to, I'm going to pursue being of service at a higher level in a way that I completely don't understand right now, but I'll figure it out. And so I basically did a 180 of my life and started looking around to see how I could maybe engage in this process. I realized pretty quickly within a matter of, an hour or two that I was going to have to do something at scale, and that I would probably have to be forward facing or public facing, which was causing me all kinds of consternation. I was very, quite anxious about that whole idea. I'd up until then, I'd kind of quietly lived as a quiet professional, and I hadn't been all up in everyone's grill about who I am or what I've done or what I think I can do. But it was time to change my ways, and that was making me super uncomfortable. But I engaged in the sort of my early recon phase of seeing how I could maybe address this, and came to the realization it would probably have to be podcasting. And so Chance had been doing some podcasting, some kind of not very frequent, and not on a regular basis or a planned basis. It was kind of catch as catch can, but he had some experience. I had zero podcast experience. I reached out to a friend prior to him and said, hey, listen, I'm going to scale something. I don't know what, I don't know how. You're a good guy. You and I see eye to eye on a lot of these things. You would be a great podcaster. I need someone to work with as I get a grip on this stuff. Are you interested? And he said, I'd love to, but I'm extremely busy with my ... right now. And if not for that, I'd be podcasting with him probably. My second person I reached out to was Chance, who I barely knew. And I explained to him, listen, this is what I plan to do. I know that you've got a podcast right now. I'm going to start another podcast. I'm not sure where it'll go, but if you want to get involved, I got to advise you that once I sink my teeth into something, I will initiate a velocity that you're probably unfamiliar with. Like if you want to do this with me, I'm warning you and advising you that you need to take time to think about what you're going to get yourself into, because it'll be unlike anything you've ever done. I will demand more of you than maybe has ever been demanded, because I will do the same for myself. And the pace that it sets is unusual. You've been duly warned. Think about it and then get back to me. And he signed off on it with clear eyes and bushy-tailed, and figured that he had a grip on it. And I said, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. So for the first year, starting on January 1st, we're going to do a podcast every single day. And every single day, it's going to be live. And I don't know what or how. I don't know if we'll be able to do it, but that's what we're doing. And sure, we did. Every single day for that first year, we did a live podcast, and it was atrocious. I mean, it was diabolically hard. All of the mistakes and failures and lessons to be learned were learned, and we continue to, of course. But that first year was super-duper hard, and all along the way, nearly every day, I wanted to quit because I just didn't want to be in front of the camera. I was like freaking out. My imposter syndrome was like raging. And I kept looking around and thinking, I am the least qualified to do this. And there's so many more people that could do this. What am I even doing? Eventually I settled into it, because the thing that kept my foot on the gas was that trying to serve at a higher level in respect to mental health and suicide ideation or suicidal effects. I have a personal relationship with suicide. I had a brother. He was just a bit younger than me. He committed suicide when he was a teenager, or when we were both teenagers. We were both bullied, and he took that option. I didn't see it ever coming. It was a surprise to certainly to us. And so that relationship with suicide is something that I kept extremely quiet. I never discussed that ever with anyone during my entire military career. No one ever knew that I had a brother or that was part of my life. And I kept that quiet with my boys, with my own two sons. They didn't learn about that until they were about 16-ish, when I felt they were old enough to kind of process that in a more mature way, so that, whatever I had to say to them when I sat them down and explained it, they could accept it and process it without, an immature kind of perspective on things. And so I kept that really, really close to my heart, kept it close to my chest, I suppose, as a topic that wasn't open for discussion with anyone until I was ready to talk about it with the world, as it were, and not through the guise of trying to make it my leading point, but simply being able to nowadays openly mention these kind of things. If the topic of mental health struggles or suicide comes up, I can relate to it to some degree, though obviously I'm not a subject matter expert. And so that's what dragged me into podcasting, was friends of mine from back in the day, not desperately begging me, but like almost desperately looking for any solutions that weren't existing at that time, and almost like digging right into the back of the pantry cupboard to see, well, what other options do we have left? Oh, there's Shaun in the corner. Let's try our last option. I'm sure he won't be able to do much, but let's give him a try. And so I got pulled out of the pantry, and now I'm the can of soup on the countertop, trying to do my piece, as it were.
Amazing, dude. What time did this all start for you? When you guys started the podcasting?
Yeah, it would have been about 4 years ago as when we kind of started. And now I guess we're proper about 3.5 years into podcasting hardcore, I guess.
Yeah, I think the last few years, everyone was kind of scrambling for answers. Like, what is the solution here? Like, what do we do? People are killing themselves. And especially within this first responder, military.
For sure.
People started watching it and scared, like, hey, we don't have an answer. Everything we've been doing has not been working. So what can we do? And I think one of the biggest messages has been people explaining their experiences individually on, if it wasn't suicide, if it was depression or anxiety or whatever it is, everyone is kind of connecting the dots now, piecing together, okay, well, everyone is treated individually differently, right? So we have to just approach it from a grander scale, and the solutions are all over the place. And I think just right now, for the last maybe 6 months for myself, I was built on finding solutions. I got tired of hearing the overdiagnoses and the overly labeling things, because I think that was creating even more problems.
For sure.
But I am curious to not get into that conversation as much. I'm curious about this, the coaching you did, and like the endurance athlete, because I was an endurance athlete. I ran a ton of marathons and I pushed myself to the limits all the time. And most of the other colleagues I work with do the same thing, and there's something different about people who can run marathons or do endurance workouts and exercises. And there's just something inside of them, you know what I mean, that can just supersede a threshold and go further. So I'd love to just talk about that, brother.
Yeah, you're right. There is something fascinating about a person who can move past their preconceived notions of their extreme limits. I am always keen to push someone beyond their extreme limits into a new void that they've never experienced. I love it. It really makes me feel alive to share another life with someone else through their new eyes of now standing in a new void that they never thought existed. And so, I think that I have a pretty decent background when it comes to ultra endurance stuff. Of course, within the military, my career path kind of exposed me to the extremeness of a lot of things. And I became comfortable in that, but I was never formally trained in how to be optimally effective in the extreme adverse conditions that we were often in. We found it within ourselves how to do it. No one ever really taught me specifically how to do it better. And so I thought about that a lot when I got out of the military. High performance has always been one of the central considerations of my life. And so, I went from Tier 1 Special Operations into a use of force instructor at a police college, then into computer system engineering, private international security work, and then a bunch of other stuff. And then I got into the ultra endurance racing coaching. Before I got into coaching, I was racing myself at 24-hour solo mountain bike races. That's where you race nonstop for 24 hours, and as a soloist. And through competing, I was learning a lot of things within that particular genre about, all training aspects to include recovery, all the nutrition protocols, all of the ancillary or supporting components that you can bolt on to just cycling in order to make you a better ultra endurance individual. And so, as I was dabbling, or not correct, dabbling, I was really engaging, I suppose, in learning as much as I could about how to be the best ultra endurance racer in the world. Not that I ever thought I could be, but that's what I seek. Once I enter into a rabbit hole, I look to become the best in the world at it. Not with the belief that I will be, but with the idea that I will seek it. Whether I achieve it or not is immaterial to me, almost. So I really put myself into ultra endurance racing as an athlete. And then we moved down to Texas for a couple of years for my wife's career. And I was racing for Specialized, the bike company down in the United States, in ultra endurance races. And the shop team that I was kind of hanging out with, one of the young men approached me. He was a very young family man. And he said, "Hey, would you coach me?" And I said, "I don't coach anyone." And he said, "Well, I see what you're doing. I'd like to get some of that. Just think about it." And so, he wasn't making huge money from my perspective. And again, young family. So I wanted to be able to do it as cheap as possible. And I really wanted to help him out. But I had no intention of starting a coaching company. So I got a blank sheet of paper and a pen and sat down and started writing down how that would change my life if I engaged in this new trajectory of becoming a coach. And so the page that I wrote down made sense. And so I created a company that day called Forward Momentum Coaching. And that turned into a 15-year path of coaching athletes all around the world. So it started with one guy, and pretty quickly expanded into a fairly large team spread all across the world. And the team wasn't under a race team name. It was simply under my coaching banner of a bunch of disparate people who were into road cycling or mountain bike cycling in a race format. Everything from short races of, 1 hour long, like criteriums on a road race, or short boosters on a 60-minute long mountain bike technical race, all the way through to multi-day or multi-stage racing. So I've covered I've coached pretty much every single genre of road and mountain bike racing that exists. And I've coached it from the grassroots level all the way through to the world championship level. I was a world champion in 24-hour solo mountain bike racing myself. And so I've probably got over 1,000 hours of racing. So then, do the math. If I've got that many racing hours, I've got like a boatload of training hours, and then of course coaching hours is a ridiculous amount of hours. So I feel like overall, after 15 years of every single day coaching, and multiple hours per day of data analysis of all of the wattage files that I would get in heart rate and sleep and nutrition and all of the good stuff, all of those years really, really helped me understand performance physically, but more importantly, performance mentally. I pretty rapidly came to realize that my Tier 1 Special Operations friends and peers and my teammates, we normalized who we are. When you're in a group like that, everything just seems normal. Right. I mean, within the group, everything is just day to day, but from an external perspective, of course, it's a freak show of performance. And so when I stepped out of the teams and then stepped into high performance racing and coaching, I realized there was just such a massive gap between what was almost Olympic level freak to where I thought I wanted to raise the racing game to, or my athletes to. So I decided very early on our Tier 1 team was called Joint Task Force 2, or JTF2 in Canada. I wanted to make a JTF2 2.0 for my civilian clients or customers or friends, as it turned out to be, raise them up in a way that turned them into Tier 1 athletes. And so I really, really poured as much energy, life energy, into creating that as I did when I was seriously pouring my life energy into Tier 1 Special Operations. I learned a ton along the way, and perhaps the most fascinating thing, as the point I was going to make, is the mental game is really where it's all at. And very early on, I coined a phrase that all my athletes have heard countless times, and that is 90% of racing is mental, and the other 10% is mental. And so I really strongly believe that. And so that 15 years of coaching taught me a lot about the mental world of humans.
That's fantastic. And I think with the endurance, there's a lot of alone time with your thoughts. So there's a mechanism that you have to learn with. Even you mentioned earlier that imposter syndrome, and you gain a relationship with that part of you. And when you're getting to the point of exhaustion, that's where the game starts.
Indeed.
So like I was introduced into endurance running when I was in my second fire academy. It was a Wildland Fire Academy. And in that academy, they taught us to run in cadence, but they extended it to half marathon. And so when I did it, I started loving it. And then I was like, dude, if I can do a half marathon, I can do a full marathon. And so there was a group of us that really ate it up and loved the endurance and like the capacity for our like just this physical body to push it to its limits. There was a couple of dudes who actually went extreme and started doing ultra marathons, and they still do it to this day. They're just animals. They run like 2 or 3 ultra marathons a year, and then they're working for the Forest Service and for different hotshot crews and special forces in the Forest Service. And there's about 3 or 4 of them that I still know that keep doing it. They've been doing it for like maybe almost 10 years now. But yeah, for me, I think I hit injury with my endurance running. And so that was like the lesson was I overtrained without learning recovery. And so I think that was a harmful lesson I had to learn. And going into a world where we also overtrain, my body was just like, hey, man, I need rest. Like, so that was something, a bitter pill to swallow, is learning rest and that art form in itself, that skill in itself, and being comfortable with it. I think I was running away from my uncomfortability in myself.
Yeah.
So most runners actually have that problem. And I find it to be really fascinating whenever I hear or run into endurance athletes because they're a different breed.
They are.
But I'm curious on your coaching on like, so if you believe it is mental, so what are some of the skills or tools you give someone, for them to go past that threshold or learning the mental game,
So I think that one of the advantages I might have as a longtime coach plays out into podcasting. And you will have experienced this when you're on our podcast. Everyone does. I have my MO is I like to take the conversation in directions and to depths that is most people aren't prepared for initially. I just like thinking differently, and I like thinking deeper than most people are prone to. So, surface level thinking versus deep introspective thinking. I'm a deeper person rather than a surface person, and so every athlete that I worked with, and I feel that irrespective of how long I worked with them, we were always digging deeper into who they are, because I was never satisfied with seeing them achieve a depth level and then feeling like, we made it. Oh, now they fully know themselves just as well as I fully know them. I was always keen for them to learn more about who they are, and I was always keen to learn more about who they are myself. So it was kind of a shared journey with every athlete that we were always exploring who they are in that moment and who they could be in the near future.
It's beautiful, dude. And I think, there's this expression, know thyself, which is timeless.
Sure is.
Like if you continue to use that and pull that thread, there's so much more to it. And the more you learn about yourself and study yourself, the more you can use that version of yourself to just catapult into life. And it's interesting because during the time of my life with the endurance running, I came across a series of books, and some endurance runners were handing me different books. And one of the books that landed into my lap was, oh man, I'm losing his name. It's the coach from the Bulls. I can't believe I forget his name right now because I loved his coaching methods. So the coach from the Bulls, it's going to drive me nuts.
Yeah,
who coached Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen and all those guys who then started coaching Shaq and Kobe. He basically wrote this. He had all his players read this book, and it was called Body Mind Mastery by Dan Millman. So I can remember all that shit, but I can't remember his name.
Right.
So that was one of the
It'll
books
be
I
in the
read.
show notes.
Yeah, right. So I just I remembered reading that book, and that book was teaching the fundamentals of life in itself, like natural laws. And so that was like my foundation. Was as I started to learn how to run endurance, I started to use his methods in this book of how to navigate life within natural law. And so I had mentioned that a lot in the podcast when we had it in the collective, and because it's so important to bounce back when you are just pulled forward in your life with all your self-interest and your imposter syndromes and all this mind activity, when you can pour yourself into the fundamentals and then be able to now cultivate your best attributes from there. And it really was a great marker and a trajectory in how I learned my mind activity, because it was so true. Everything that I did in my endurance workouts or when I was performing was all mental. And so going through fire academies and, that in itself is a whole new experience, because you're having to work now as a team through, large thresholds, whether it's heat, putting on all this equipment, whether it's claustrophobia, but it didn't matter what you did. It mattered what the weakest person in the group did. So learning to kind of succeed together as a unit through these very arduous, just uncomfortabilities and undesirable experiences physically was amazing to fall back on fundamentals of natural law. And so one of the main fundamentals was making sure you don't push too much with force, because if you use too much force, then you're going to cause a lot of resistance and then cause mayhem or chaos. There's no balance. So that was like the key, is learning the capacity within yourself to manage balance. And I'm sure you know this as a martial artist, that's one of the main components, is not only using those methods in the dojo, but out of the dojo, use this world we have as your own dojo as well. And I think I love talking to martial artists because they can totally get it. And they get how you're not supposed to use just enough force, but at the right moment, because it's all about precision that makes the ability for your body to be more successful without injury, and also being able to counter as well, which is kind of the whole concept, is pulling back with this accordion effect within yourself. Hey, I need to pull back, not too much resistance, not too much force. I need to balance it all out. And I think with endurance athletes, man, if they went to read that book, it'd be really helpful for them to kind of see where you're at. You know, it gives you a focal point to see, like, hey, how do I think? How do I believe in myself? What's my inner chatter within my mind? Because it talks a lot about that, because it's something to adjust and to see really like where that's at. You know, give yourself a scale 1 to 10. Do you have a lot of chatter in your mind?
Yeah.
You know, and it's yesterday I just did that because I had so much chatter in my mind. And I was like, dude, what is going on? But I just had to accept that it was there first, you know, and just believe, like, you know, it's just a moment where the chatter needs to be, and leave it. So I think that's kind of like, but if you don't have the skill sets to understand how to manage mind chatter, you know, it's really difficult.
Well, you know, the on the aspect of martial arts, I do agree. Martial arts interaction with the larger, the broader world around us, the external world, is a fascinating topic. The 4 components of we'll call it force, or the amount of power that you apply against a thing, the speed that you would apply against that thing, the timing that you would apply against that thing, and the distance that you would apply against that thing. You can use that within a conversation. You can use that within a relationship. You can use that within the world. Everything that you could do can be viewed through the lens of those 4 martial arts aspects. And I think that if we're talking about ultra endurance racing, again, all of martial arts will apply to racing, to training, to the way you live your life. On the chatter, the mind chatter, and it doesn't even have to be rumination. It can just be a constant stream of internal consciousness about a variety of subjects that aren't rehashing the subject, but just continue on new novel paths that are exploratory, but it just the chatter doesn't stop. I think that one of the things that people can consider is how aware they are of how much that is happening within their life, because there's a tendency, without trying to be aware of the chatter, there's a tendency for the chatter to be almost at an unconscious level. It is constantly occurring as a cognitive dissonance, a little bit of a white noise sizzle in the background that is like, it is not uncomfortable, but is not serving you as well as it should. And so the fascinating part about a 24-hour solo mountain bike race is when the race gun goes off, you are now by yourself for 24 hours. There's no music. You can't listen to music while you're racing. It is illegal. And so you've just got the silence or the noise of your mind for every single second for the next 24 hours. And, you know, when it's 2:30 in the morning and you're out in the middle of Nowheresville with your helmet light or your bar light, and you're railing into a corner at Warp Factor 3 thinking like you're on top of the world. Well, when you come out of that corner, now you've got a flat section for the next 75 seconds. And it's nothing but painful pedaling because your monkey arse is on fire because it's been on that saddle for so many hours. And the discomfort, the minor pains, the dissatisfaction with how you took that corner, why you passed that guy or why you didn't pass that girl, or I should have drank more. All of the background chatter of the daily admin of the world continues streaming because you've got nothing else really to think about because you've already worked through all of your girlfriends in high school. So, like, what else is there to think about?
Totally.
And if you're not thinking about the real-time corner railing, now you're in the past or now you're in the future because the present is almost boringly mundane. Pedal stroke after pedal stroke after pedal stroke. And so you start filling in the gaps of the pedal strokes, and now you can't do your girlfriends, and so you're into something. Eventually you'll get into something that you didn't think you were going to get into. That thing bubbles up, and it might be at 0330 hours, or it might be at 0430 hours, but something's going to come up for sure in that first 24-hour solo race. There's no duck dodging or diving. It's like you buy the moment of the thing that you didn't want to face. And so I've often said that, listen, if you want to save yourself $10,000, don't buy a ticket to India and book a month at an ashram. Just sign up for a 24-hour solo mountain bike race because you're going to get clarity on something that is going to make you uncomfortable in the moment. And then you get to chew on that for the rest of the race and then probably for the rest of your life. And what you do with that is completely up to you. But engaging in something that is long enough without any other distractions other than pedaling and pain is a purifying, clarifying activity that I think more people should engage in, perhaps not on a bike, but in ways that they can push themselves to, we'll call it, quote unquote, the extreme, where it strips away the minutia of the day-to-day and just leaves you with you to face you. It's rare that those things occur naturally on a week-to-week basis, so you almost have to create them yourself, I believe.
Oh, 100%, because we're in a world of ton of distraction, you know, so emptying the mind is one of the most important factors, because if you have a cup, and I love how you use the term vessel, if it's overflowing, then you can't put anything into that vessel any longer. So if you use that simple concept with the mind as its vessel, then you have to have some type of practice or discipline within yourself to empty that out. And, you know, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be this sacrilegious idea of sitting down and meditating. That is a helpful skill, but you can use that. And most monks will call themselves a walking meditation because they do it all the time.
Agreed.
So it's kind of like adjusting your position to see, hey, first is checking in with yourself and giving yourself like a number from 1 to 10 where I'm at. Each day is different, you know, and each day is affected by the activity going on in your day as well. And so Phil Jackson is the coach.
Oh yeah, right.
So I don't know why I forgot his name.
Dude, you came back in like the man with that one
strike,
though.
You know,
Dude, that was a better way of doing it, I think.
So Phil Jackson, even studying him, he studied Native American culture and he studied Zen Buddhism. And so I was like, man, what is this guy learning all of his stuff from? And so I started learning the things he learned because I always loved basketball and I loved Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant and like just the amazing athletes to watch. And I was like, who is like sculpting these athletes who are the best in the world? And it was Phil Jackson. And just learning how he would just, even on the court, just sit back and wait to call a timeout. He would let his players make the mistakes instead of intervening. He would sit back for a second and just like, hey, let it happen. Let him figure it out. And a lot of times we just constantly have this edge of wanting to push the button constantly, instead of just sitting back, observe what's going on first, and then you can see what are my solutions here and come up with a list of them. And for a while, I had to actually write down my problems and then write down solutions on the other side because I couldn't see it unless it was written down in real time. So these skill sets are cultivated over time, you know, and I think for me, I just adjusted so much on wanting to be the best. And I realized you try to become a firefighter, you have to be the best or else you will get passed up. And so most of my younger days was all about trying to get there. And then once I got there, I was like, okay, now what do I do? Because everyone I'm working with is an extreme athlete, D1 athletes, even professional athletes. And then you're in a station in a world with these people. And it was bizarre. Like the arena of human behavior with these human beings was insane. And I think that was where there was some adjustment around like character and integrity and sovereignty. And those qualities actually were the ones that had to emerge because you would either eat up someone else's perspectives and listen to them when it was probably not the best advice. And I had learned that the hard way through working through some poor leaders who made me be like them, or else I was not accepted in that specific firehouse. And so I think through characterization and cultivation of self, that became more of like a focal point for myself, And I think with endurance athletes and martial artists, they have this. They focus a lot on self-improvement and self-mastery, which is so admirable and attractive. You just want to like be like that because they can stand there and be so like stoic, but they're really just, they've cultivated that ability to be that way. And I'm sure you can relate to that because it's not like you became the man you were through just not pushing yourself to those extremes, you know what I mean? But you've also learned a lot about who you are. And then now you've been able to use that concept and then help other people by just talking about deeper subjects and challenging people's perspectives on a podcast where, that's so important when we're working with this mental health crisis we're dealing with, and I think, I love to hear a little bit more about martial arts and how it's helped you kind of like enhance your outlook on life and like helping other people too.
That's a timely question because I don't know if you've seen it. No one has to track anything on my social media account. I really truly only exist on Instagram other than within the collective podcast on YouTube, etc. And I don't control that. Chance does. So I really only consider my personal existence on social media as Instagram. And so just the other day, I put up a video of me shooting a 6-hour P226 Mark 25. I don't know if you saw the video or not. Well, then you may have seen the verbiage. I put in another little one up this morning with the proper verbiage explaining that what you're seeing or what anyone is seeing right now as they see me shoot on this flat range is new to them because I've never ever, that's the first time I've ever put up a shooting video or me moving on a range with a weapon ever in my life. No one's ever seen that. And so, a lot of people view these kind of videos through the lens of their own life. They view it through the lens of their perception, their biases, their assumptions, their expectations. And so I don't represent anyone other than myself. I have a background as probably we'll call it a professional shooter at the tier 1 level. I was extremely fast, extremely capable, precise. I was a world-class shooter when I was young and when the ammunition was free and when I was tasked with that job. And so when I left the military, when I left the teams, I left all of that behind me. And so the other day when I picked up a 9mm for the first time in over 20 years, I'm not the same shooter I was, but I'm still pretty handy as a shooter. I still shoot better than most typical shooters, I would say. I'm faster, more capable perhaps. And that is because of my martial arts. So I haven't picked up a weapon in over 20 years or had one in my hand as a pistol, but I move like I was shooting a pistol just last week or the week before, and it's because of my martial arts. So, one of the things that I do truly believe in, and it's kind of a play off of Miyamoto Musashi, is how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so when I was taught how to use a short barrel tool back in the day, I was taught at a world-class level. And once I understood that was always my baseline. That is what I expect of myself, because I know that it is possible for me. And so once I understand what the high watermark is, and if you do it long enough, I believe you encode it within your body, within your nervous system. I mean, literally, I've got tens and tens and tens of thousands of rounds with the pistol encoded within me. All I had to do the other day when I picked up that pistol for the first time was just brush off a bit of dust of that deeply encoded nervous system program, kind of flick the switch on it and re-engage it as a module within me to deploy on the flat range that day. And my first round felt like I'd never stop shooting. And the second round felt like I was the man to some degree. And that might sound like bombastic, or it might sound like really big-headed, but I felt like I had been transported directly back to when I was highly competent. I just in a 62-year-old body. That's the only difference. So my martial arts that I do pretty much every single day of my life for over 40 years can translate into nearly any physical activity that I choose to engage in. But that's just the physical aspect. Me moving on a range, people will see the physicality of it, but they aren't seeing, or they can't appreciate, the mental aspects that are going on, the psychological, the emotional, the kind of spiritual aspects of the... I do subscribe to Zen Buddhism to some degree, and I also subscribe to the Teshu principle of the sword, the sword of no sword sort of aspect. And so with the pistol in my hand, I just saw it as a small tanto, or a small bladed weapon that I train with all the time. And the moment that I put the small bladed weapon in my hand and started pulling that trigger, it disappeared. So I never saw the weapon the entire day. I was just moving as a martial artist with a deployed module from my nervous system that was simply the interface for a much deeper practice of multi-decades of studying timing, distance, speed, and force as four general principles within the martial arts scope. So all of that to say, as a martial artist, and it doesn't have to be any particular martial art. It just has to be a art that takes you within yourself to better understand who you are holistically. I think is something that every human should engage in to some degree.
Yeah, like martial art teachers are always speaking riddles, so it's like when I first started working with a martial art teacher, he was always telling me how my breathing was fucked up. I was like, he's like, Jonathan, your breathing is terrible. He's like, you have to breathe from the belly. And just my body mechanics were so off by the time I came to him. I had to go back to the drawing board and just relearn everything. And so I loved how you were talking about one of your videos, how everything comes from the diaphragmatic breathing and how everything is positioning down into the pelvic floor. That fulcrum of the body is so essential. And just to relearn that is really challenging, trying to teach a old dog new tricks. And it's humbling at the same time, like relearning something, right? But learning to remaster my body and going back to fundamental acknowledgement of, first of all, I know nothing. That's how I had to start. I know nothing, and my body is out of whack. And so my method of healing my body came from a very humble, true respect approach towards me not knowing anything. And as I started to learn more, I realized like, wow, like I am capable. The body is capable. It's just trust is really what needs to kind of come through. And so once trust started to kind of cultivate in that place, then everything started to bloom. Because most of my problems in my life came from a lack of trust. And so the more I started to engage with where in my life, where my psychology is lacking trust, it was something to investigate. And so as that investigation started to come through, more memories would come up where I didn't lack trust or didn't have trust. More memories came up where I needed to grow in that space of my life. And the character from myself started to emerge, this new version of who I am seeking to be, which is someone who is calm and collected and also capable of pushing myself to the limits, but also learning how to be somewhat of a beam of light for others to see, because that's how I started. I started seeing other people who were beams of light, and I'm like, hey, like, what are you doing different? Because there's something about what you're doing that seems more capable in capacity for the human vessel than anyone else I've come across. And all of them have been martial artists, surprisingly, right? And so the martial arts world is, we just see it as like UFC, right? That's what we all see now, as like this mixed martial artists. But my favorite martial artists are the ones who dive deeper into the psychology of it all. And most of those are the ones who can be super calm in the ring when approached with pressure. And that pressure feeling, all it is just input. That's all it is on the human psychology and the human neurology. And so the more input we can add to our capacity for resilience allows our neurology to kind of adjust. Like, hey, there's no threat here. Even though we perceive it as a threat, we can hold this. And as you build those building blocks over time with some resilience around that, you can allow the body now to engage this anchor of trust. And so that's why it's really great for most first responders to start doing cold plunging and sauna, because just those two elements, those two thresholds can allow your neurology to learn with just a little bit of stimulus, you can dump out the mind. Just a little bit of relaxation, you can be in a state of, oh, this is uncomfortable. This is undesirable mind activity. And so more leaning into those kind of activities and practices allow us to gain that resilience and the ability to just be in like the seat of yourself per se. You know what I mean?
Yeah, the contextualization of where you're at any given moment in your day, in your life, in that second is so critical. And so how do you gain contextuality? How do you gain context in the moment? And so I always look to extremes. And so it doesn't have to be extremism. I'm looking for, this is where I am right now. What's the hottest and what's the coldest, to use your cold plunge in the sauna as an example. And so using those two extremes as contrasters or context in that moment, a person should be able to get into a cold plunge and think something. And that thinking should be a response such as, whoa, that's colder. Oh man, I needed this. Or, oh, I can't wait until I get into the sauna. Or, man, I just wish today wasn't today. Whatever it is, the extreme of the moment will promote some thought, some novel thought that shouldn't just like zip out of your head and not be considered. That first response of, whoa, this is cold, should tell you something about where you're at that moment. And you should dive deeper on that moment as to, why do I feel it cold this morning? Why is it such a big deal this morning? Why am I looking forward to the sauna this moment? Why am I not looking forward to the sauna this moment? All of these little flags or little signals or little feedback loops that we get from the universe is for us to dive into, as far as I'm concerned. They are literally messages from the external world to our internal world, or however you view life, that are worthy of seeking more information from or diving deeper with. It's there to join you in the moment. That cold signal is there for you to hold its hand and walk deeper down the path with it in that moment to see what's up. And then when you step into the sauna, if you lean against the back wall and kind of droop down and kind of melt into the moment and think, oh, I'm so exhausted. What is that telling you? What is that signal all about? Are you exhausted, or is that you telling yourself a narrative that you want to hear because you didn't sleep well that night, or because you've got a big task later that day, or just because you're worn down, or because you're ready to give up? All of these things are messages from the universe that we are supposed to be with in that moment and take to a place where we gain information from, or wisdom from, or a furthering of our life from. And so cold plunge, hot sauna, these two contrasts should enable us in a half hour space to see not only who we are inside today, but what the world is telling us today. How we interpret those two positions of internal world, external world in that moment are as small or as big as we allow them to be, and are as compelling or not, or as insightful or not as we allow them to be. We can be dismissive of the messages that we're getting the moment we put our big toe in the cold water, or we can accept that message as to its true intent and hopefully be pure and clear in your relationship with it in that real-time moment, so that you get what the message is giving you, or the universe is sending you as energy. So I love these kind of protocols, these systems that enable us to be better human beings. And as a high performance coach, I kind of sliced and diced protocols up into all kinds of sort of surface level consumable modules, so that my new athletes who didn't really know me very well could accept a module that makes sense to them in week 1. But I can assure you that by year 2, that module was not a surface level discussion. We were talking about your energetic content that day. How are you feeling, rather than what does your wattage say? And so if you can engage with a human on day 1 with the idea that we're not going to form a relationship for the rest of our lives by staying half an inch below the surface. If I'm involved with anyone, my intent is that we'll go places that neither of us understand, perhaps, but we'll do it with good intent, so that we both learn about each other from the process, and the overarching theme being that the world will be better for it.
Yeah, it's amazing to dive deeper into the mind, because it's a fascinating concept, because most of what we're taught is the complete opposite of what we believe the mind is. I think that in approaching mental health, I think it's an opportunity for everyone to reconstruct our approach towards what that is. And the way I've constructed the ability for what the mind is like the conscious mind, and what we perceive as consciousness as your first person perspective is going to be like a pea. And the subconscious is more like an onion. There's so many layers and layers and layers and patterns and ruts. And these are all physically manifested through neural pathways in the brain. And so your ability to study yourself and unraveling that onion is going to be your ability to have a road to self-mastery. And the unconscious part is that like a potato. It's just deeply embedded and buried within your system. And so your goal is to get kind of into the subconscious and just unravel and microdose yourself, like these limiting beliefs or these fears or these self-masticating concepts we provide for ourselves through just behavioral patterns we learned since children. And we've carried them along in our life. And when you start unraveling that onion and you get to the core of it, I think it can really help you just to see yourself and your capacity of that first person perspective who's making decisions in this real life, walking, waking world we live in. And so, like, picking apart down to the unconscious is the hardest part because there's not much that you can get to in the unconscious realm. And I think there's just been a lot of talk around, okay, how do we get to the unconscious? And they say it's well, it's brainwaves. Okay, it's going into theta and even into that gamma state. And so they've done like studies on Buddhist monks where they have all these probes on their brain, and they realize that these monks have superseded a different wavelength of gamma. And this gamma is extremely fast, where they're perceiving things outside of their own mind and they're receiving universal information, which I found to be really fascinating. And that's kind of like where that potato starts to be activated. And now it's becoming an opportunity for you to turn the channel onto a different radio frequency where you're accessing now information that's beyond the human psyche, which I think that can be now tangible with someone realizing that you can get into a gamma state. And I've studied, I'm also a hypnotist, so I could put people into theta, which is where you want to get to the subconscious. And working with a group of people to get into theta, I've been able to realize how much more there is just by putting yourself into theta alone. And when we go into the subconscious, it has so much information that is available to you, but the trick is how you get there and how we perceive our realities as all in this onion that is just filled with muck and filled with dirt. And it takes precision to kind of move through those different layers. And I think there's been a lot of talk about psychedelic therapy, and that's kind of like in the move right now of how we treat first responders, because that pee is it's hyperactive and you can't even get to the onion. So there's been an opportunity for some of these medicines that open up the ability to get to the onion. And the only thing I think with some people I've talked to on the podcast over the years who've introduced this concept is it can take you to the center of the onion, which can be damaging. And I think over time, if you just learn by listening to people's conversations about mental health who have gone down to the onion and have come back out with information and a roadmap, I think it can be really helpful. But over time, I'm just like still like beating my head against the wall of like, hey, what are the solutions to this mental health crisis that we're dealing with? And I think there are so many parts to it, I think, but first we just have to understand the mind and hearing from people's perspectives on how we can kind of unravel this thing with good intention and with good format. And I'm very curious, because you've been doing this for 4 years with Chance and talked to so many different people. I'm curious what you think would be some solutions on, mental illness and mental health issues. Kind of curious about it.
Well, let's keep it to the mind for now, because that's your general thrust in your commentary, and I love this topic. In fact, I'm just recently coming out of this is not like me pumping a book, but I've just finished writing a book called The High Fidelity Mind that I started, I guess, in November of last year when I went on a 9-week vacation to Vietnam and Japan with my wife with zero intention of writing a book. I mean, zero. It hadn't even entered my mind as a book. Just several days into that trip, or into the vacation, I was just casually just sitting down quietly thinking about things, and then bam, that moment where the comet arc across the dark sky of my mind, that bright comet trail occurred, and I was like, what is even, oh no. And I had a book in my mind called I didn't know the working title at the time, but it's now called The High Fidelity Mind. But the entire comment was about how the mind works. I've spent a long time considering it. I've done a lot of research on it. I've spoken with people all over the world about it. And I just felt like was compelled to some degree. I was almost obligated by the universe to engage in trying to write a book about it. Well, 85,000 words later, it's now at a publisher, and they are currently proofreading it. And so it will be a book, as it turns out, a book that didn't exist in my mind on November 1 of last year. And so I put about 600 hours into that book. And so I have given it some, I have given it some intellectual consideration at an academic level beyond the deeper consideration of spending time with humans in the real moment of what can I learn from this person in respect to how the mind works and how the soul works and how we all work and how this big game works and where are we all going on this ball of water that's spinning through the universe. And so I think about a lot of things deeply and to some degree esoterically, and perhaps not conventionally like most people do on this subject. And so I had a crack at it with a book. Now, to your point regarding mental health and how the mind can engage in this process, I mean, first and foremost, I feel that if we're going to talk about psychedelics, and I have done psychedelics.
Which ones have you done?
So psilocybin,
Okay.
heroic doses, and also microdosing, and just a very, very side story. I'll keep it less than 60 seconds. But I went down. I was doing international security consulting, and I was flying out of Italy into Peru to do some stuff. And long story short, I ended up, I had a spare day, and I bumped into a guy, and he had a mountain bike. And I said, "Hey, do you mountain bike?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "So do I." He spoke no English. I spoke very little Espanol. And I arranged to go on a mountain bike ride with him the following day for about 6 hours. He was on the national racing team. And so he found a bike for me, a helmet, and some shoes, and we went out for a ride the next day. And we rode all day, and then we rode down into this mountain valley out in the middle of nowhere, Peru, near Cusco. And we rolled up on this big high gated fence. He banged on this big gate opens, and I won't divulge a whole bunch of details, but at one point I was in the backyard, and I got handed a glass of some fluid, and I thought, oh great, I'm going to try chicha. And so during our ride, I'd seen lots of these 45-degree sticks sticking off the mud wall huts, and a little kind of like, almost like a little paper lantern kind of thing hanging off it. And in my broken Espanol, I said to him, "What is that?" And he just kept saying, "Chicha, chicha, chicha, corn." And so the old ladies chew on corn. The enzymes in the mouth break down the corn. They spit it into a big container. They allow it to ferment, and then that becomes an alcohol. And so corn spit alcohol is how I was thinking. But I thought, man, I want to try it because it's legit, like old school local, and I'm here for the culture, the history, and I want to feel it, you know? And so I get handed this glass, and I glug it back, and there happened to be a person sitting next to me, next to this dwindling campfire at about 2:00 in the afternoon. I'm like, this is all kind of weird. And as I glug it back, I was like, dang, that was way worse than I thought it was going to be. And so now you've got to imagine like a big glass of a cow had been chewing on grass for a couple of minutes and then barfed it into a glass. That's what I drank. And I thought, man, that was just freaking disgusting. That is not what I expected. Anyway, I was sitting there about 15 minutes, and I was like, whoa, man, I feel off. What is I got to vomit. Where's the bathroom? And so I stood up, and I looked at someone. I said, "Where's the bathroom?" And they said, "It's right over there." And I punched straight to the bathroom, barely managed to get the old wooden door closed, and I hurled like a Monty Python skit, like it, like straight projectile vomit. Like I could have almost broke the ceramic of the toilet bowl, like so hard. What a purge. And I was like sweating bullets, and I was like a mess, and I kind of not stumble out, but I come out like, what in the heck? That chicha was freaking rank. And I sat down and I said, man, I don't know what's with that chicha. And she looked at me and said, chicha? That was San Pedro. And I said, what's San Pedro? And she said, oh, it's San Pedro and ayahuasca. I was like, what's that? And that's how it began. So unknown to me, I had engaged in a psychedelic experience that I had never planned. And so that was my first probably hardcore experience. And the mixture that I engaged in was created by a proper shaman, a proper indigenous long-time shaman who was on site. And I just didn't know all the backstory that I had engaged in at the time. It was a confluence of many odd factors that just aligned into, well, that was probably supposed to happen. And so, yeah, those are psychedelics. And so coming from that perspective of, I'm not a clinician. I'm not like a white-collar, nerdy academic who hasn't been in the field per se. I mean, I've banged my shin. I've drank gross stuff. I've gone to places that humans perhaps shouldn't go. And I've also done it not under the influence of anything. I've considered a lot of these things for a long time and as deep as I can. And I've come away from the idea of perhaps back in the day when I was in Tier 1 Special Operations, where I was perhaps a little more one-dimensional on this understanding of how the world around me works. I've spent the rest of my life considering building it out into a more three-dimensional existence, a more three-dimensional understanding of are we just meat puppets, or are we floating energetic balls, or are we quantum physics-based? What are we? What is it all about? I've never stopped thinking about these things since I had that experience in Peru.
Was that so? That was San Pedro and ayahuasca put together.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow! And then so you had a journey after that.
For sure.
Oh, okay. That's amazing.
Yeah. And I don't mind. I don't know. Do you want to hear a little bit about it, or
Sure, why not?
the experience? I won't get too deeply into it, and I won't freak anyone out. But at some point later in the evening, I climbed up into a tree, a very tall tree, and I just laid back in the limbs of the tree, and I was one with the tree. It embraced me, and I was embracing it. We became one and the same. And once I allowed that to happen, I shot out into the center of the universe, believe it or not, as one does, and engaged with a greater central entity. Perhaps you could call it God. You could call it we'll call it the signature of our existence. I might have been looking at my inner self. I'm not quite sure, but all of that to say, I was surrounded by and engaged with a very, very bright and loving and intelligent and all-knowing entity that didn't have a shape or form or a name. It was just the thing and me. And surrounded by secondary, we'll call them, not, I don't want to use terms like angels or anything like that. I don't want anyone to lock into a very small-minded definition of what I experienced on this excursion. It was something that is hard to define in shape or form or label. But it was an intense experience that wasn't freaking me out, but it was a lot to comprehend in the moment as I was communicating back and forth and feeling whatever I was feeling on whatever energetic level. When I came back from that, I was a different person to some degree, but not. I hadn't been given a new name. I hadn't been given a new brain. I hadn't been given a new big toe. I was the same physical entity with a perhaps a different energetic understanding of the world around me, or at least a different energetic question. I was more questioning than I'd ever been up until that kind of perhaps psychedelic ambush that I engaged in. So
Amazing, dude. Oh, well, I know with ayahuasca, like it's supposed to unlock something within you. And it's been known to actually unlock DNA strands
yeah, I've
within
read.
your system. And also it takes you back to remember yourself, and it takes you to the core of remembrance, which is ultimately all information. And without what would be called I guess the ego is lack of a better term you would be using for that. But it's been referred to more as like the default mode network, this estranged
Agreed.
perspective
Yeah.
we carry around this first person, I am here, that it's just me in this body, this meat suit. It disturbs that in itself. So people who resist that exchange of separation from that piece of you is the beginning. And once you are able to do that, now you have the freedom to expand who you are and remember who you are. And even going back to the concept of knowing thyself, is that in itself is to remember. And most of all information we carry and on a path to self-knowledge, self-healing, self-mastery is all about that in itself. So the opportunity for an assistance with some of these medicines allows, and something like ayahuasca, it's been referred to as a master plant. So if you're stepping into the realm of self-mastery now, where you're being taught by, a voice, and by that voice, you're being exchanging just ancient knowledge and off of the language of frequency, essentially. And you begin to like expand who you are just by simply listening. And I think with the thing with ayahuasca too, it speaks the language of the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So when it's accessing that, that's where you start to unlock Pandora's box. And personally, for me, I believe Pandora's box is the heart. But it's probably not an accident that you ended up drinking some weird concoction and you started like to sit in this tree and have this experience. But going into the last 2 years of talking to so many different people, because we've had people come on here talk about ayahuasca and iboga and these master plants that are here to help humanity through this crisis. And I had a friend who did iboga, and he was telling me, like, dude, the iboga told me that basically the human race this is not the first existence, and if we don't get it together, it'll get wiped out. And so and that's happened through different cycles of time. And so that medicine taught me basically I'm going to have to go serve this medicine and learn how to do it, because it's going to help humanity basically learn how to pull myself out of my own hole. Individually, each human being is designed to do that, because unless we take that responsibility with ourselves, then we're going to get caught up in the same stuff over and over. And most of the communities who are wrapped around these medicines, like they are in harmony and they work with each other in community. And that's kind of like how they built on extraction of their ego, extraction from their own self-righteousness, and able to help others. And that's kind of the whole point of this game of life, is doing that in itself. The goal is to, not get wrapped up in your own bullshit so you can't connect. And that's the beauty of life, is human connection. But when it's severed, what are we supposed to do? We got to go back to basics, and try to extract, the distractions, and then extract all of the self-interest that we are always in our own heads about. And I think with the mental health crisis, those individuals, especially those who are in service, they are so far out and just sacrificing themselves that they don't know how to help themselves or look at themselves in the mirror with affection and with love. And I think when you start speaking to a lot of people who have never done those things, they're like, dude, I'm not speaking my language here. Like, what is going on? But we are so far removed from that that we have a crisis on our hands, essentially. And, just working with, me working as a firefighter all the time, we're working with a machine, and this machine is man-made. It's a man-made thing that will keep running despite your injuries, despite your mental health issues. And we're just put in there into a seat and expected to do things like a robot, but we're not treated as that. And I think that can remove us from our humanity. And the whole point of us is to be human. And I think when we're trying to be our best in order to bring a paycheck home, we lose sight and traction on truth, and we lose traction on meaning. And I think that's one of the main causes of what's really going on, because, for me personally, my fear is quicksand, but metaphorical quicksand, where, growing up and getting a job and paying the paychecks and then getting a mortgage and then now paying for that. Fast forward, I have all these things, and I will sit at this kitchen table and not remember who I am. That's the greatest fear. And I think that's what's happened to most of our individuals that we're trying to help is the quicksand. And so, but the thing about quicksand is the more you struggle, the deeper you sink. And so how do we help these individuals? And I think it's an opportunity when we're introducing ancient medicines to give you a stick from the outside and pull yourself from this muck we put ourselves in. Because most of everyone I've tried to help, it is really difficult because of years of programming and years of resistance and years of struggle to where I can't even get to them, So it's like, I honestly don't know what to do sometimes unless you do things like hypnosis, where you're now accessing, you're superseding that P part of the brain, going straight to the onion, and we can pick apart those things. And the beautiful part about that is you're getting your own information. Like you're receiving all that stuff from yourself. So it's an opportunity to now, it's a cheat code essentially to how we get to the center of that onion.
Well, I think you said something a while ago about the potato and, being the center of things to some degree, kind of hanging out in the dark, as it were. And that one of the interesting, when you said it, I was wondering if you chose the word thoughtfully, or you were just looking for a quick analogy, or you have intentionally considered it deeply, the potato, as it were, because potatoes grow in the dark. Mm-hmm. They spread their roots in the dark. And so if you want to leave a potato, and if you want to leave your mental health in the dark, that potato is going to grow roots. And those roots don't necessarily serve you well. And to grow roots, they have to draw energy from the actual potato. So the potato itself shrinks and dwindles and becomes rotten in the dark, even as it's spreading its roots to try and grow. And so, the loose connection could be made that if you're treating your life like that deep buried potato in the dark, you don't want to dig it up and address it. Well, you're in for trouble. Mm. Your life is effectively dwindling to some degree, and the roots are going in directions that perhaps you aren't fully aware of or not actively trying to control. And chances are it's not serving you well in the invisible creep and crawl of those sprouts. So, it's something to consider. One, I should probably say a couple of things. I'd mentioned that context is good, the distinction between a cold plunge and a sauna, getting that left and right of arc understanding of who you are in the moment that day is kind of key. And psychedelics are a context, so that San Pedro ayahuasca journey that I went on gave me context that I'd never had up until that moment. And so it's not that I was unaware of the deeper aspects of life, the metaphysical aspects of the world around us. I was aware of that, but I'd never experienced it practically or as in first person. I'd never been in it in the moment quite like that before. And so it was a new experience for me that deeply and intensely. And so it was a welcomed, a much needed, something that, quite frankly, I wish I could have experienced sooner in order to have context, even if it was, quote unquote, a little extreme. But playing with that or continuing on with that logic loop it's important that I say that is not to be taken lightly. Seeking context shouldn't be taken lightly if you're edging towards the extremes of contextuality. I would never, ever, ever recommend anyone that I know or care for to ride your mountain bike out into the jungle and then just simply glug back some San Pedro ayahuasca and sit back and see what's up. These kind of things should be done thoughtfully with consideration as to not being ambushed. And certainly, I think they should be done under the guise of professional oversight, where someone perhaps is there to help guide you in the moment as a participant in the process, but not under the influence of the ethno or the ergogenic aid or whatever you have ingested yourself. So I personally would have, I may have gained more from the experience. It's hard to say. I mean, it's hard to relive the past, but I think looking back, I would have preferred for it to have occurred differently. And certainly, I think it would have been helpful to have someone who is aware of how these things unfold to be there as a guide, if you will. I mean, later that night, I was sleeping. Believe it or not, this is a crazy little side piece, but sleeping in a North American teepee, like an Indian teepee, that would have been, from the 1800s kind of thing. A teepee, I don't even know how it got there next to this mountain face in Peru where I slept for several hours that night. It's hard to believe that, I don't even know if it was my imagination or not. It was a straight up legit Cherokee teepee. I don't know what that was all about, but that experience unfolded in a way that I didn't lose an eye, or I didn't fall off a cliff, or I didn't get run over by horses, because all of those things could have happened, quite frankly, in a kind of a semi-chaotic journey. So I'll reiterate that if anyone is thinking about engaging in ergogenic or into ethno or into psychedelics that are powerful, never take them lightly, never enter into them without pre-consideration, and certainly consider professional guidance in these matters.
Yeah, I think, in our world, especially in the United States, we want to capitalize on everything and bastardize it. I think that's the problem. And something like this is it's regarded as just sacred. And the sacredness around, generations of cultivating a technique to even make the medicine in itself is truly amazing. Agreed. And so when we come in, like a Westerner who says, I'm sick, I want to go do this, they are in desperation. And so that desperation is where the context is not taken as, I would say, more professional and more skewed to realizing what you're getting into. And so I think, but in essence, I've just seen so much great results where someone could have a first person experience with truth, and I think when there is an opportunity for growth, I think by using a substance, which is more so a tool than it is an actual solution, because ultimately we are the solution in itself. And people lose sight on that when we're trying to find a savior complex, something outside of us that needs to do our own healing. Because with that responsibility that you're taking yourself on, it's a lot of work, because you have to face yourself. And when you face yourself, that's when you go into that dark place where that potato's there, and that all that rotten cultivation and fertilization that's been taking place. And going through that darkness is it is devastating sometimes. And this comes from personal experience, going through my own darkness and having to face that.
Me too.
Dude.
Yeah.
It's rough, dude.
It's rough, man.
But at the same time, it was more so eye-opening to see like, wow, this is really who I am. This is really what's been seeping in underneath the surface. And once I took it apart piece by piece, it was easier to just ingest it. So like microdosing, little pieces of fear, microdosing these little unwanted truths I didn't want to face, and giving myself just these small little bites was the best approach towards that, because I'm usually someone that wants to just spearhead it head on and like take it too much on all at once. And that pattern with myself was harmful. And that comes from me thinking that I deserve some form of punishment coming from the way I grew up. And I realized that that was a pattern that I had, was believing subconsciously that I deserve discipline and I deserve punishment. And when I had realized that within myself, I took things with a different approach, that life is not about punishment. Life is about, giving yourself some stimulus, some input, but however, there's growth with that, but not constantly trying to whip yourself on the back, like with just a long whip of like five to six tails, like this, Catholic monk sitting against a fireplace, just like, praying for forgiveness and whipping himself. Like that was who I was at a subconscious level. And that was the darkness I had to face. And when that part of me was the imposter the entire time. But when I had to face that part of myself, it was more so that it was just a little boy in the end who needed proper parenting, because he went reckless. And that's all it was. It was a relationship. And once I built relationship with that version of myself, that's when, anything that was rotten became fertilization. And from there, that's when the roots really started to grow within the version of who I'm seeking to be. You know what I mean? So if you take that great perspective, I think it's helpful for people to see that. And so they don't take it too seriously. And to see like sometimes the light that comes and emerges from your darkness is really evolution. And I think when we take evolution with a little more seriously and more responsibly, then it becomes a really beautiful thing. And I've noticed, watching people who have taken the courage to do that, their life blooms like insane. Like the world around them starts to move in different ways they had no idea could have grown, like their family and their relationships with their parents and even their work life. It's just creating their health. And I think that's one of the main components, is like your health starts to emerge, like your radiance and your vitality and your ability to move differently is like how we seek to grow and to seek to, but it only takes that courage, to face yourself.
There's a few things that, and listen, I align with all of that. There's a few things there that could be several podcasts. There's no doubt about that. Because you injected a lot of really good stuff. The human brain, just to take it to a simplistic perspective on what you were talking about, a lot of your life was driven by that young boy per se. We're all that. Really our brain, our physical brain, not, how our minds can expand or how our brain actually works at an unconscious level and then into the conscious level, and then how we deploy our programming. Our brain was created over hundreds of thousands of years. And how it was designed over those hundreds of thousands of generations is it's a predictive modeling process that tries to do a number of things, but it's formed in its early days by what it faces. So whatever little problems it faces, it learns to cope with those problems and creates very early programming. And that programming drives the rest of your life. We have our brain is a very old structure, but it operates in a very modern world. Our brains were designed to work in a field several hundred years ago or 1,000 years ago where things were silent and where your chores were your chores and you had to do what you had to do. And life was reasonably simple to some degree. Certainly you weren't getting pinged. You weren't getting binged on your phone every 30 seconds, and you weren't being dragged from one meeting to another to the meeting in the hallway between meetings. And so all of these distractions that are part of our modern world, the layers that have been dumped on our brain that it wasn't built to accept or work within, are formative programming for a simpler world in our first few years of life now is embedded in us and often unquestioned throughout the rest of our lives. So our 6-year-old boy programming is driving the 37-year-old man. And this is the way it is. And that's as simple as I can say it. Of course, we could, debate the details on that. We could pick the fly shit out of the pepper and say, but you didn't think about. But on general terms, we have an old brain in an overly modern world, and it's causing all of us to struggle because our programming is perhaps not serving us as well as it could. So this programming has to be revisited, and psychedelics can revisit that programming, but that's one tool. As you've said, there are many tools. Meditation is a form of a tool that you can use to revisit that programming and get in touch with that perhaps liminal space between the structure of the brain and the mind and see how or what or who you are as a individual. And so the processes that you use, whether it's yoga or religion or making a good cup of coffee in the morning as best as you can, we all have these things that we can engage in to make us better, perhaps. But they have to be intentional. They have to be something that you, to some degree, believe you're engaged in to become a better version of yourself. Because that active seeking of betterment, that active seeking of the process of enlightenment is a path that helps bloom the journey. The self-belief that you believe in yourself is enough to take you 2 steps further down the path. You'd said something that kind of started my rambling soliloquy that I'm in right now, and that is you'd mentioned how, you have to learn to love yourself.
Yeah.
And you know what? Like, I didn't for a long period. Lots of dudes that I worked with couldn't say the word love to another dude or say the word love to themselves as they look in the mirror. It's just really difficult. That's not how I was raised up as perhaps in my programming. And so these things that make us uncomfortable, the word love with ourselves or for our fellow man, if we're uncomfortable with things, it's our, again, opportunity. It's that moment you put your toe in the cold plunge water and you get that feedback message. Why am I uncomfortable with love? What is my major malfunction, bruh? And so, none of us should ever let these little messages slide by unengaged. So once I started seeing the pattern of where I'm not functioning as well as I could within my programming, then I started addressing that. But programming is one thing. That's how we sort of live our day to day. But then, as you know, there is more to our programming than just our physical form or how we live our lives. There's that energetic sense of, how we perhaps affect the people around us and how we affect ourselves and what we give to the world. And so if you are doing a better job as a man, as a person, and you're flourishing and you feel it, you're brighter, you've got a larger footprint, you feel more impactful, you just feel right. You feel like you are who you're supposed to be. Well, others feel that as well. And it's not through your words or sometimes through your actions. It's through your simple geolocation. If you're standing close enough to them, you are impacting them. And, we can talk about the heart math of the world and how, we resonate at certain frequencies, or we could talk about, the aura that you give off, or we could talk about the projection of intent and how that can impact someone. We can talk about all kinds of things, but I think what we can agree on is that we, in effect, have kind of our physical world, and then we have almost a metaphysical world that is often unexplored by most people. And I think that without considering the invisible effect that we have on others, you are affecting the world all around you blindly, and to some degree, perhaps uncaringly, if you choose to ignore the idea that we all affect the world around us at a metaphysical level without our consideration. The moment you start considering that, you can start doing it a little bit better, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with perception, and what is perception in itself? It's the eye realizing, what am I creating within this construct, and we're putting so much emphasis on that in itself. You're having a lot of blind faith with things. You're having a lot of blind spots within yourself, and most of us get caught up in that little box. And so just to reconstruct perception is helpful. It's refreshing when you're having someone explain, like, okay, like my perception is just what I'm here to create. And no one really puts that in any perspective. No one was taught in grade school anything about perception and the world you're creating and the responsibility that you have and what the world you create, because it really comes down to power and your ability to hold power in itself. And I feel like there's a lot of input outside of us to keep us from being powerless, or keep us to be in a powerless state, because true power comes when you start acknowledging that you have power within you to make those decisions. But with that power comes that responsibility. And the empowerment path is to be more sovereign within yourself and to know thyself and to make decisions based off of language of frequency. Am I going to make decisions based off a higher vibration or a higher frequency? And I just had a conversation the other day where one of my guys at work, he was just saying the word faggot a lot. And I was like, dude, you don't understand that how much charge of hate that word has. And I was like, you might as well just say the N-word. And he was arguing with me about it. And it was just this conversation around frequency. And so, it was a lesson for him to be like, hey man, because when I'm really sensitive to frequencies in itself. So when someone says a word like that, or a word of hate, I could just feel it ping in my field. I'm like, ding, I can just feel it. I'm like, dude, it doesn't make me feel good at all. And just a simple like maneuvering around frequency is like the rules to the game. And so you have to understand the rules to the game is frequency in itself. And that kind of moves our perception towards a route of understanding the laws. And if we're getting extracted from the laws and we're steering away from how the laws are co-creating this world, then our perception can kind of manifest better with how we move on this game board. Things like ayahuasca, like your experience, that changes the game board completely. So because you're having this experience with higher dimensional beings or whatever you want to call them, and they're giving you information of like how to live your life, and then now your goal is to go live your life in accordance to that information. And so the way we're perceiving this world is ultimately our responsibility, and you have to cherish it and make sure that it's not taken advantage of either, because that's where self-respect starts to come through, and giving yourself a version of truth at which no one else knows but yourself. that kind of goes into like that savior complex too. Like if you're looking for anything outside of yourself to heal you or give you like your truth, it's not going to happen. I guarantee that. And that's why it's helpful to have people to kind of nudge you towards that direction. And I think that's why people are so prone towards religion, because it gives someone a sense of safety. And because I probably don't understand what true safety feels like, because it's not real. Going into the world, there is no true safety. There's always an opportunity where something can come in from the backfield and disrupt your life and your perception, this bubble you've created for yourself. So the aspect to maneuver with that is an ability to trust that anything in your life is going to happen for you, not against you. And it gives you a sense of freedom. That's why I love talking to world travelers, because when I started traveling to different countries, I started learning about myself a lot quicker, because getting thrown into different cultures and getting thrown into different experiences where you just land in the right spot. And for some reason, you were supposed to be at that right spot. That's why I love this story about you mountain biking, because something drew you there and there was no mistake for that experience. And the beauty in that is like you just kind of let go and have this freedom to just go somewhere, and just like let life just kind of take you. And that's kind of where we're supposed to be. So let life take us. And when we pull back to our perception, if you just give yourself an opportunity to let go of like your constructed concrete values and your perception, then there's more freedom and life will start to just take you. And that's kind of like the goal we're supposed to do. Life will just freaking take you, man. And I don't know if I really answered your question. I think I answered some of it.
You did, and you set me up for an interesting conversation now, I think, or something that I want to explore with you. I'm curious about your ideas on this. So, I think it's valuable, really. I genuinely feel it's valuable that you and I have these kind of conversations, or this conversation, or you and someone else, or me and someone else have these kind of conversations, so that others who might view us as a label, he's a former this or he's an active that, they label you and I as a certain avatar, a representation of something. But we're more than that, of course. But often I find the case is that it's uncomfortable to represent your more than if you're just trying to stay in your safe lane of your avatar should be X. And so I don't subscribe to being my avatar. I like to explore. I like to be bigger than the assumptions out there. But it's a tricky area to operate in, because if I get a little too wild with my ideas, a little too exploratory in this conversation, perhaps there's going to be someone out there that it will kind of not scare them away, but it will cause them to hesitate about, well, I'm very new in my journey and this stuff is kind of freaking me out, and I don't want to go there. And so I'm just going to call it quits now. I think I'm good with exploring a little bit of meditation, and I'm done. I'm tapping out on the meditation now. I'll go no further. I try to encourage people to go as deep as they can, perhaps, as safely as they can, but as deeply as they can, and not have any guardrails of expectations, and not limit themselves with an identity that says they can't explore in ways that no one ever has. So now I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory as to young Shaun, and then it will help you understand why old Shaun explores the way he does. So when I was in high school, my mom went in for some general surgery, and she died on the operating table.
Oh,
and so, in her own words, she punched out, went out into the universe. She was talking to a light. It had about a 3-minute long. She died about 3 minutes. Came back to life with this vision, this story that where she was told that she could predict the future, or she could foresee the future for others. And that's a pretty wild little story. And so she chose to engage with it, and that was never her way prior. And how she chose to engage with it is she had been told to go visit Edgar Casey's program out on the East Coast, Virginia Beach, I believe. And Edgar Casey was known at the time as America's psychic, America's fortune teller, if you will. I don't know if you know anything about him.
Yeah.
But anyway, she went there for a week and came back, and she had kind of flourished into perhaps what she always had as an ability, or into something that she was going to become. I'll make a very long story short. When I joined the military back in 82, 83, her and my dad moved back to Northern Ireland. I was born in the UK, and she's been there ever since. And so people in Ireland used to drive right across Ireland to go and visit her, for her to read their futures, to read the tea leaves, or to read tarot cards. And those are just proxies or mediums in order to tap into whatever is, And so she was doing this on a very regular basis, so busy that she couldn't keep up with it all. And I'd fly back to, my first experience with this was I'd fly back to Ireland to visit them when I'd only been in the army a little bit. And I'd be walking down the sidewalk, and some random person would be walking towards me, an Irish person, and they'd see me and they'd say, "Are you Shaun Taylor?" And I'd say, "Yeah, who are you?" "I know your mom, Bridget." "Oh, okay. How do you know her?" "Well, she read my tea leaves." And in my mind, I'd be like, "Oh, here we go. Another story that's wild and nonsense." But I just heard so many of these stories about how my mom would predict this, and it would, and the person standing in front of me would be in tears, saying how it had come to light exactly as she had said, on the exact day, in the exact way, and my sister and my husband and our neighbor and the dog and whatever, all the things. It was all to some degree coming true. So, I started recognizing that I guess maybe there's something there. And then my mom said to me, "And you should be aware that not only do you have this ability, as I was told when I was dead, but you have more of an ability than I have, and you are supposed to use it." And at that time in my life, I was like double down not believing. I was like, "You said what? I'm for sure not gonna now." Just because it was so much to take on, and just over the top crazy in my mind at the time. I just thought it was like almost delusional. And so I never engaged in that process. But I've always been highly empathic. I feel everything. I feel the room. The moment that I stepped in your door, within a second, I felt the whole place. I felt you. I'm a very sensitive guy. And so when I was on the teams, in Tier 1, I was feeling into the room before I would kick the door. And that's just the way I've always been. I thought everyone did that. It wasn't until I started talking to people many, many years later, after I left the military, about, well, of course, like just before you kick the room, you just feel into that room and you see what's in the corner, and right? What? No? And so I didn't realize that not everyone feels as deeply or as intensely or as sensitively as I do all the time. And so with that empathy, or that empathic sense, and then my San Pedro ayahuasca journey, I came back with not a new ability. It's not like I turned into X-Men, a super mutant or anything like that. But it unlocked something in me that I didn't want to believe, because my empathic sense of people and rooms and the experiences around me had changed in a way that I could kind of predictively understand where things were going to go. And it's not like I can pick a winning lottery ticket number 3 weeks from now or anything bizarre like that. And it's not like I'm not saying I can predict the future. That's not what I'm saying. I just see the world a little bit differently. I feel it a little bit differently, and now I allow it to happen. And so I would never have dug into this unless our conversation
awesome,
was unfolding. But what I would have loved to have been able to say when you asked me the question about coaching is how I coached was through my empathic tea reading abilities for the future, knowing what that person needed in their life in this moment, but also in the future. And so it's hard to explain that to anyone, especially if I'm coaching them digitally. If I'm coaching someone in Australia that I've never even shaken their hand, but I know them better than anyone knows them around them, in a sense, in ways that they can't understand, or sometimes I can't understand, but somehow it works for them, for their flourishing, for their growth, for their betterment. These are things that I still don't understand, and they don't bother me anymore. I don't dwell on them. I simply accept that when I stepped in your door, I knew as much as I needed to know about you as I needed. And the conversation as a whole that we're into now is almost secondary. It just fills in minor gaps about what I already knew about you the moment that I shook your hand. And so what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I know for a fact that every individual person has psychic skills. They just don't know how to use them. And coming from, teachers who have taught me certain things, it's because you have individuals who make a living based off them deeming themselves as an identity as a psychic. And that gets really far off where it pulls them out of the human experience. But the human experience is knowing that we have these capabilities, and they've been demonized for a very long time. And I think the last, maybe a couple of decades, people have been realizing that these capabilities are innate, they're dormant within us, and you just need to know how to unlock them. And so, coming from personal experience, when I hit my head, I had sustained a couple gifts that had emerged. Kind of like when someone hits their head and they become this savant, and they just know.
Familiar.
So it was a double-edged sword because I was perceiving too much information. And so over time, I thought I was going crazy, essentially. And this was kind of part of my spiritual awakening that had occurred. There was so many moving parts, but this was one of them that had happened. And so luckily I had a friend who knows how to navigate dimensional fields. And so he does it all the time. And so he taught me a lot about these skills and how to use them. And they're kind of like pets. And so if you kind of have like a dog or a cat in your home, you build a relationship with them. And when they misbehave, there has to be a repositioning with your relationship with the animal. And so that's how I was taught how to treat my psychic abilities. And some of my psychic abilities were more so on perceiving information that would just come to me, either through meditation or whether it be through, like, same as if I walked into your home, I would be able to perceive a lot. And it was only because I had also had a sense of discipline with some of the skills and practices my teacher had taught me. And he also was telling me he had gone through the same experience where all this stuff came onto him all at once and he didn't know what to do with it. And so he had went through a mediumship with a medium who taught him how to perceive psychic skills. And it was more so putting into context of like how it is used. It's more so like turning it on and off and having authority with it because you don't want it to run rampant. So same as like taking care of an animal, it's the same concept. And knowing how and when to feed it, and also how to manage its grooming and things of that sense. So with some of these ultra capabilities that are emerging, because you have things like the telepathy tapes. I don't know if you've heard of those, that podcast, and you have these special children who have these abilities. It's because they are not ingrained with the cognitive dissonance that we are ingrained with. So when you reduce that noise, you now can have more capabilities with your gifts. And each individual is born with certain gifts. And unless you are able to learn how to use them and actually sharpen them, then they will be more efficient. Add a culture that demonizes Eastern philosophy and demonizes the ability to make decisions for yourself out of fear, and being able to understand an authority in your space that has power over you. Like, those concepts all create a dumbing down of your gifts. But once you start to emerge with the true power within you, which is essentially just making your own decisions, governing your own life in the way you want to, is kind of like how you can cultivate those things. Now, working with very talented individuals who have come across after I started this path has been eye-opening, because now the more I would do work on myself to remove and clean the filter of my human organism, now that the filter is clean, there's more capabilities. So the more you do conscious work on yourself, the more you rid the body of disease and illness and filth from poison, now the body becomes a conduit. And so through that conduit, you receive information, you receive your gifts start to kind of have that little twinkle of light, becomes more of like an actual electrical voltage that you're able to use. And only because you've done that cleansing and that purification, there's now room for refinement. And so just the simple concept I've told people is like, the body is generally a giant voltage conduit. And so your job is to open up that conduit as much as you can, because now when you open up that conduit, there's more life force that's being able to manifest through that space. So years of doing Qigong for myself, I've now accustomed to knowing my energy, my Qi, my life force, and now that has been able to be useful. Because when I'm in a room with anxious people, I know it's not my anxiety. I can palpably feel the anxiousness in the room. You can, get a knife and cut the air with that shit.
Sure. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But now over time, I know that's not my stuff, so I don't take it on. But the hard part is when you're around people you care about, like my mom. So when I'm around her, we have a heavy connection. So when she's feeling something, I directly feel it. And this is only through like years of discipline and focus and precision. This didn't just happen overnight where I just was like getting better at it. It came through, first I had teachers, and then secondly, I have a practice where I'm able to constantly focus on what my stuff is. And then secondly, I don't want to project my stuff onto other people. So like, just to answer your question, even through your mom, something was unlocked through this near-death experience that a lot of people have that. Like, I had a chiropractor who told me he was hit by a car when he was 7 years old, and he was in a coma for like 7 days. And after that, he was basically taught how the human body is constructed, and he became a really good chiropractor because of that experience. So like, we don't know sometimes like what is outside of this brain perspective that we have on our mind, how we perceive our world, but there's more to it. But I think there's a dawn of reckoning right now within human consciousness that it's expanding beyond the limitations and the I guess the scaffolding of fear that's been holding up our species. And so now that that's being demolished and being unraveled, now it's opening up people to these things that have been dormant all along.
When I was a young buck, like I was probably 24-ish. I was in 2 Commando at the time, and I had a 2-week block summer vacation. And I decided, and it's a crazy little story. It'd take me maybe 3 minutes. I decided in my head that summer that I wanted to go find my old school friend, Mark Jones, who I grew up in high school with, up in Canada. He was also born in the UK, like myself, in the same town. We went to high school together. He graduated. I went to the army. He moved back to England with his parents. And that's the last I heard of him. And back then, like there wasn't a whole social media ability to find people online or whatever the case is. And that wasn't my skill set anyway, per se. And I wasn't really too heavily into that. And so, I got it into my head that I was going to go find my friend Mark Jones in England somehow. And so I had no tips. I had no lead. I bought a plane ticket and I landed in England. And then I got on a train. And then when I felt I had to get off the train, I got off it. And then I got on a bus. And I sat on the bus. And when I felt like I had to get off the bus, I reached up and ding, ding, pulled on the string and I got off the bus. And the bus let me off right in front of a police station. I walked into the police station and I said, I know this is going to sound crazy. I just flew in from Canada. I'm looking for a friend of mine. His name is Mark Jones. Any chance you could help me? I know that there's going to be some sensitive information that you can't give me. You don't know who I am, but you'll have to take me at faith that I'm looking for my friend from high school. If you could just maybe point me in the general direction. Of course, they looked at me a little sideways, asked a few more questions, but then, they got on my side and said, "You're heading in the right direction. Keep going." That's all they gave me. So I walked out of the police station and I didn't even know if my friend was alive or dead, quite frankly. So I walked out of the police station. Here comes another bus heading in a different direction. Generally speaking, I'm on it and I sit there for a while and an old guy is sitting across from me and he looks at me and he said, "Where are you going, young man?" And I said, "I'm looking for a friend." He said, "Don't worry, you'll find him." And he got off. And then I thought, what the hell, man? Ding, ding, I get off. I look around 360 and I thought, I'm walking in that direction. And I walked and walked and walked until I walked into a pub and I said, "Any chance anyone here has heard of a guy called Mark Jones? His dad's name is Davey." And they said, "Oh, yeah, they own a pub just down maybe a half mile away." I said, "Oh, yeah, okay, thanks very much." Finished my pint, walked out of the pub. I still got my big rucksack on as I'm drinking my pint. I walked down the street and for a few minutes, I see a house on a row house. Not the first row house, but the second row house. And I thought, I'm going to go knock on that door. I don't know why. Walked up to the door, knocked on the door. Door swings open. Girl looks at me and said, "Oh my God, are you Shaun Taylor?" I said, "Yeah, I am. Who are you?" And she said, "I'm Mark's girlfriend." She reached over, grabbed a photo and showed a photo of Mark and her with their arm around each other. I said, "Well, that's nice. Where's Mark?" And she said, "He's at the pub." I said, "I'll see you later." And I turned on my heel. And that's the only conversation I had with her. And I walked straight to the pub. I walked in and took my rucksack off, put it down next to the bar. Mark and his dad were facing away from me, pulling pints for all the men in the pub. And I banged on the pub counter. I said, "What the hell does a guy have to do to get a drink around here?" And the two of them turned around on me and saw me, and they almost shit their pants. And so, the odds of that happening, of me finding them, like it was a needle in a haystack for sure. I had nothing to go on, and in a matter of just half a day of landing in England, to some degree, I was having a pint with my friend. That just shouldn't have happened. But I'm not telling you that story for that reason. I'm telling it for the next reason. So I hung out with them all day long. All the locals are having me pour pints and jacking me up because my pouring isn't as good as it should be, and everyone's having fun at my expense, and it's a great time. The pub closes. I'm helping Mark and his dad kind of wash dishes and put stuff away, and I said, "Boys, I'm freaking so tired. I haven't slept for over 24 hours. If you don't mind, I'm going to go to bed." "Oh, yeah, well, you know where your bedroom is." And so they put me up in a bedroom that his sister would normally sleep in, but she moved down to another bedroom to sleep in a separate bed with Mark, her in two different beds with her brother Mark. And so I walked down this pub is old, hundreds of years old. And so I walked down this cold hallway, stone hallway, and I get to the part where I turn immediately right and look up the stairs. Now, the stairs are on an angle like that. The construction of these stairs wouldn't have passed code today. But of course, these are hundreds of years old stairs. And they're the stairs are about that deep. And so it's a bit of a step to do each step. And it's quite narrow. It's about maybe this big that you'd walk through it. Not a really wide stairwell. So it's long, cold, a bit gloomy, and the walls are like 3 feet thick. And as I take my first step up the stairs, I'm like, what the hell? Hair's up on the back of my neck. And I've always had a pretty good sixth sense. I take another step. I'm like, what is even going on right now? What's happening? I take another step and I was like, oh, something's about to go down. And I didn't know why. I'm just walking up the stairs. And then as I took my next step, my foot is hovering in the air to take the next step. And then we'll call it an apparition, but really it's a ghost. Came out of the wall in front of me, about as far as from me to you, and moved directly in front of me, moving left to right, and passed straight through the other wall. And this, I could have reached out and grabbed it if you could grab it, but I didn't pause. Like when I saw it coming out of the wall, I had to make a really fast decision. And it was, do I step back and shrink from this moment, or do I accept what's happening and not let it interfere with my life? Do I step forward through it, or do I freeze? And I chose to step forward. So I kept my natural step rhythm, and just as it morphed into the other wall, I almost passed through it. And so what moved in front of me was a girl, probably in her mid-20s, Victorian dress, ghostly, white, as kind of like a Hollywood ghost sort of image, and an ephemeral with shape but no shape, dimension but no dimension. And as it went in front of me, I was like, I had cold. It was extremely cold in the space that I was in, and it had a certain feeling. And so I got to the top of the stairs, walked into the bedroom, sat down on the bed, and thought, what the fuck do I do now? What just happened? Did that happen? That happened. What do I do now? What do I do with this? Do I go back downstairs and tell everyone? Do I sit in my room and wait for the ghost to come and get me? I thought, nah, I'm tired, man, and I'm not going to surrender to this thing. We're either going to get it going or whatever. So I crawled under the bed, and I'm not going to lie. I was a pretty strong-minded dude, and I was pretty confident. I was pretty capable. But that night, I pulled the sheets right up to my nose and sat there like I was a 6-year-old boy, like scared, not scared, but like almost anxious of what might happen. The room that I was sleeping in was pitch black, and I didn't know if the ghost was going to come and get me or not. You know what I'm saying? So I wake up the next morning. I go back down the stairs, a little hesitant, I might add. I go back down the stairs. I turn left and start heading back towards sort of the pub area. They're all up and they've all been awake for a bit. They're all eating breakfast. I walk into the kitchen. I say, morning, everyone. There's 4 of them sitting there. And, hi, Shaun, how'd you sleep? And I kind of had to make a decision. And I said, not bad. It was okay, thanks. Oh, yeah, was the bed okay? These kind of questions. Then I decided. I said, okay. You know what? What I'm about to say might sound a little crazy, but, I'm just going to say it, so my apologies. Last night I saw a ghost as I was walking up the stairs, and none of them blinked. The first thing that was said was, oh, you saw her, did you? What the shitballs, man? Everyone had seen her as they'd lived there. Apparently, she's a pretty regular thing to be seen in that stairwell. Later that day, as Mark and his dad were telling the story about, and then Shaun saw the ghost, and oh, you saw her, did you? Oh, I saw her like 4 years ago. This is the kind of thing I was getting. This is the kind of information I would have preferred before I walked up the stairs. So my point of all that story is this. Up until that moment, I had an understanding of these things, but I had no practical experience of it. And not that many people, quite frankly, that I've ever talked to have had an experience that has had so much resolution to it. Like, almost like watching me and you as we are right now, like real resolution, real almost three-dimensionality. And so again, it's an uncommon thing, I feel, for these kind of experiences to be so vivid and then practically or tangibly connected to other people's immediate experiences over the years. So it was that moment that actually also altered my life to some degree, where even though I was kind of quote unquote a standard issue airborne soldier, kind of just doing that almost one-dimensional approach to life, my mind's eye was opened to the idea that there are invisible forces, there are energies around me at all time that I am unaware of, and I'd best get with that program. I need to better understand these things because my curiosity wanted to know more about it, but my sense of not living as full a life as I could in the moment also was pulling on me a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%.
What do you think about that?
So I mean, like taking those little microdoses are helpful because you don't want to blow a fuse, and then also knowing like how you operate, because some people want to just put so much emphasis on something and so much meaning to something that it changes their whole worldview and their personal view all at once. So, being anchored in with your personal truth and your identity of who you believe you are is the best anchor point to stick with. And anything outside of that is going to be external and just like little sub tabs on your whole programming and operation in life. And so the more meaning you put to things really can cause harm sometimes. And so if you just witness it within yourself and witness things outside of yourself, because it can be overwhelming. And I think we don't want to overwhelm ourselves with also esoteric and information, because that's all it is in the end. It's information. And with one of my teachers, he had explained that there was a ghost on this girl. She was kept explaining. She's like, I have this ghost and I can't get rid of it, and everyone thought she was full of shit. And so she finally went to this retreat, and everyone kept telling her to go see one of my teachers. And so when she finally went to him, he was like, yeah, she has a ghost. And after she left, he was like, no, there's no fucking ghost. He's like, she's just making something up.
Right.
And so it's kind of like this when you're playing with the real and the unreal. We have to be careful with what we create in our minds. But when there's something that's like for sure valid,
Yes,
and
right.
you think you're going crazy because you saw something, it's best to just see it as information. And it can be neutral. There's nothing neither good nor bad. It's what the meaning and the thoughts we place around it that can create this world or this viewpoint that can change our life. So don't let that extra information change your life. Let it be as text messages into the general conversation of how you operate in life. And so I think over time, working with great individuals who have taught me a lot of interesting things, it seems to be like, hey, don't get sidetracked off your path in life. That's kind of the main story or the main concept of what I explained, right? Because if you let things disturb you and keep you off your path in life, then you're going to be just off the broken path. And so the goal is to be on the right path. And in the end, I think you can either take the gravelly road, the highway, or the windy road. But in the end, you're going to end up at the same place. And in the end, we also have to recognize we will die. And so do everything in your power to do the best you can, and with great love and capacity to get to that point. Because memento mori, like we will die. Remember that, we are immortal. We're not immortal. We are mortal in that sense. So with that takes great courage to understand that responsibility.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the ghost-like experience, of course, as intense as it was at that moment, and perhaps the 24 hours subsequent to it, I pretty rapidly assimilated that into almost a fascinating insight to information that I had previously been unaware of, practically, or I guess it was the metaphysical had shifted into the physical momentarily. And again, that validation of those around me who had also experienced that just lended a bit of, oh, this is a thing. And so once I knew it was a thing and I accepted that this is a thing, it never really messed with my life. It actually added to my life. It was a benefit, as it were, rather than a negative. And so, the ghost moment could have been any number of things if I would have been lazy and labeled it and said, that's what that is and that's all I'm going to give it. I've thought about it, not dwelled on it, and I will maybe revisit it. Like in this conversation now, I haven't told this conversation or this story in bloody ages. So it's not
a great story.
It's not something I seek to like, hey, I've got a party story. You know what I mean? It's just I rarely ever drop it on anyone. I just don't think most people are ready for these kind of stories, quite frankly, at least coming from a guy like me who has got certain, people have certain expectations, I suppose. But this is my lived experience, and it just simply matches up with other people's lived experiences. So I think it's valuable for people to hear it. But again, it hasn't driven my life. And to your point on it is simply, it entered my path and the way, as I call it, or the path I also call it. My path is perhaps unique to me, but it wends and winds its way to, I guess, ultimately my point where I'll decease. My path has crossed many people, or many people have crossed my path, and so throughout this conversation, we've been talking about, how to do certain things better and how to be a larger version or a more complete version or a fuller version of ourselves. And for what? Well, for ourselves, of course, but as you know, given that you've got over 80 podcasts now, you're doing this for you, but you're doing this for others. You're serving at a higher purpose, as it were. And so I see the path, these messages or moments or information that we get on our path are for us to accept and do whatever we do with. But now I choose to do good with it. So if I can understand that there is more to this world than this physical moment that we're both three-dimensionally operating in, that there's other things going on around us at all times that we may or may not be aware of, just by simply stating that out into the universe with my voice loud into a podcast, there will be someone out there that knows me and maybe not just shakes their head a little bit and says, what? Say, what? Does he believe that? Well, maybe it is a thing. And if that's enough to get them rolling in a direction that expands their consciousness or expands their path, or maybe not expands their path, but makes the path a little more clearer for them, adds that extra little bit of information that keeps them on the path, perhaps, I'm all about it. And I don't do it with like a cheerleader giddiness of I'm trying to fan the flames of making someone believe that there's ghosts out there. That is absolutely not what I'm attempting to do. I'm not being vulnerable either. I don't feel that way. I'm simply presenting information from my path that perhaps will help others on their path. With that said, why do we do it? I mean, other than the simple, we want to help our fellow man. Well, we all know that, as you said, memento mori, at 62, the average age of a man in Canada to die is about 78. So I can see the writing on the wall and have for quite some time. If I know that my path has a finite point, why even discuss ghosts? What's it all about? Why even podcast? Why are we here, as it were? And so if we're not just here for our own little puzzle, what are we here for, do you think?
Well, I believe we're that the universe is always trying to experience itself within itself. So, like, just how I started off the conversation on the collective podcast, like I believe like the human being is it's a non-localized phenomena, and that in itself is that we are a version, a piece, a shard of the consciousness trying to create a version of an experience to learn from itself, because it's always this ever moving, interwoven, all connected experience. And if we kind of, it's a great analogy because it allows us to remove the version of us that wants to believe that this is just it, and we're a part of a greater tapestry of this matrix that is just evolving and moving and morphing and in flux. And so I think with that in itself, I think that's a great way to kind of like bring perspective more so into phenomena itself too, because phenomena are supposed to be unexplainable. And that gives you more of an ability to jump into the mystery. And that's partly like the whole point, is like you're supposed to just be enamored and in awe of the mystery in itself. And like, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Fountain. It's a great movie. And like there's this one quote in that movie. It's like the road to awe. Like that is like Pandora's box, the road to awe. And that road in itself is the experience. And so if we allow ourselves, the whole point is to allow yourself to get there, though, is to allow yourself to be in that, on that road to awe. Or you're going to just, resist, or you're going to cause more harm for yourself if you're just constantly trying to control things. The point is to not control. And that's the paradox and within the phenomena is release control, allow things to take form, allow the tapestry to just move everything the way it's supposed to, because everything's already in its right place. And like this comes from like trying to extract, Eastern philosophy and all the riddles of what everyone's been trying to figure out since the dawn of time. But in the end, there's nothing to figure out. In the end, it's just be the experience. And that's kind of the whole point. But
That's kind of how I'm here.
right?
I mean, dude, I'm down here on vacation visiting my bro Hemage from Tier 1 Special Operations days. You dropped me a little DM, reached out and said, hey, do you want to do a podcast? And my answer took about 3 seconds. And it was my self-belief, my belief in what you just described as the shared experience that we're all in. You, myself, my friend, all the traffic that we went through to get here. All of us, all of it, the whole thing is a interwoven tapestry that the good pulls on the bad pulls on the good, the threads unravel, the threads get rewoven. All of this tapestry is for us to engage in or not. And I choose to engage. I choose to, not blindly, but I choose to willfully accept things that sometimes don't even make sense. For me to drive half an hour up here to a guy that I only met in a 1-hour podcast that, I know
Totally.
hardly anything about, but I know more about than I know, of a lot of people. I knew more about you before I showed up to your door. I knew more about you when I shook your hand. And now I feel like I know as much as I need to know about you to state this, that the reason that I'm here is because I was supposed to be here, and because you were supposed to ask and I was supposed to say yes, and we were just supposed to let it occur as it's meant to be, without fighting it or without second questioning it or without giving it a definition of expectations. We simply existed together in the moment willingly and almost joyfully to some degree, with perhaps our own little intents of, I'm trying to help my fellow man. Well, sure, that is still a thing for me. But when you step back from perhaps these smaller sort of attributable good deal, good guy things that we're trying to do, if you really step back at a universal level, those things barely register on the universal scale, but then at an inverse level, they are the only things that exist at the universal level. And so I find it fascinating when, you are talking about the subject, or I engage in this topic with very few people, that the existence that we all have right now is merely a moment in time-space continuum that we get to willingly engage in or not, with either righteousness or to some degree malintent.
I like to end on that, brother. We're at almost 2 hours and 40 minutes here. So
What? I wasn't even paying attention at all.
Yeah.
I have no idea what the time is. Didn't
time
even
flies,
look at my watch.
Time flies, dude, when you're having fun. So, well, thank you again, Shaun. Dude, thank you for coming on. I'm sure we can do more episodes. We're gonna have to do them remotely though.
I think we will have to.
So, and I'll be on the collective whenever you guys want to invite me, and we'll just have conversations. That was cool, dude, where I can just like come in to people I had no idea and just have these really in-depth conversations. I have fun doing that stuff. So, once again, thank you everyone for listening. I'll put all the descriptions for Shaun and the collective podcast. You can follow him in all his social medias and also his collective podcast stuff. But thank you, Shaun, brother. It was a great conversation, and I love you guys. Take care.
Thank you, man.